More than 156 years ago, the United States ratified the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. Now, if you think about it, the first 10 amendments they're called the Bill of Rights. That came practically with the initial signing of the Constitution. So a 14th Amendment, that was a pretty big deal. And it came right on the heels of the 13th Amendment that ended slavery. This was huge. It was a part of the America recovering from the Civil War. It's a part of America incorporating the slaves into American society. Now, the 14th had 5 sections, and we'll focus on the first of those 5 today with Bishop E.W. Jackson and former Congressman Louie Gohmert. The 14th, it's going to be in the headlines soon. President Trump has already put it in his attention span, and he's going to work to overturn the most recent interpretations of that. Is that a bad thing? Is it a good thing? Well, let me read the first 28 words of the 14th Amendment. It says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Here's the question. Does this mean any baby born here is automatically a citizen regardless of how they got here? Can a pregnant woman sneak across the border, deliver a baby, and demand citizenship? Surprisingly, the answer appears to be yes, at least according to the modern interpretation. But is that right? And if so, should it be changed? This will be the subject of an intense debate and will likely go to the Supreme Court for a final word. Joining me today is Bishop E.W. Jackson of the Commonwealth of Virginia, a dear friend, a civil rights leader, a devoted preacher of the gospel. E.W. is also an economist and attorney by training. E.W. is the founder of STAND, Staying True to America's National Destiny. Welcome, E.W.
Thank you for having me, Kevin. Great to be with you.
Oh, it's good to have you. I know the 14th Amendment is something that's near and dear to your heart, something you studied. Can you share the context of why it was enacted?
Well, look, it really was in some ways an answer to the Dred Scott decision that was handed down in 1857 by Judge Taney, who basically said that black people weren't citizens because, of course, slavery was still in effect at the time. And it's considered to be one of the terrible decisions ever made by the Supreme Court. But after slavery, after the end of the Civil War, our founders sought to, that is, those who were in office at the time, sought to correct that. And so the 14th Amendment was never intended to give what's considered to be birthright citizenship to anybody born on American soil. It was intended to make sure that everyone understood that the African slaves, former African slaves, and their descendants were citizens of the United States of America. And sadly, from the very early stages of the country, people sought to exploit that.
Well, President Trump, he has a problem with this. He brought it up. Is it because he's racist in challenging it, or is it not true and maybe he has a good point?
Oh, look, he has an excellent point. And of course, I admire President Trump's determination to address these issues. I just don't think, Kevin, that he can do it with an executive order. I think it will be immediately challenged. And unless the Supreme Court decides to overthrow a decision handed down in 1898, United States versus Wong Kim Ark, that held that a Chinese person who did not have any parentage in America was in fact an American citizen by virtue of being born in our country, which means they interpreted the 14th Amendment as giving what we now refer to as birthright citizenship. I just think unless they overturn that, he will lose with an executive order. But I think the country is really ready for an amendment to the Constitution that makes clear that only those born to American parents on American soil are American citizens.
Do you think the Wong Kim Ark decision was wrongly decided? What are your thoughts on that?
I do, because, look, I think there are two ways to look at this. Of course, scholars argue that the language about jurisdiction gives you a little bit of an out. You can argue that certain people, even though born within the country, are not subject to the jurisdiction of the country. I think that's a little bit of a stretch, a little attenuated, but I go back to what the intent of the language was. The intent of the language was not to provide birthright citizenship for anybody. And if we stick with the intent of those who wrote the 14th Amendment, we'll be fine. But I think, sadly, that horse has already left the barn, and we're going to need a constitutional amendment to make it clear.
Well, let me quote Time that has an article, Birthright Citizenship has been challenged before. This supports your point. It says the decision recognized only 3 categories of people born on U.S. soil who could be classified as not being born subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Children born into membership in sovereign indigenous nations, an exception later addressed by Congress in the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924, children of high-level foreign diplomats due to their immunity from U.S. laws, and children born to alien enemies occupying territory fully taken over by a foreign power such that it is no longer under U.S. sovereignty. Okay, so those are the 3 exceptions. The one that bothers me, though, is that first one. My grandfather was born in the Cherokee Nation. He was born in 1908 in the state of Oklahoma. It became a state in 1907, and yet he was not declared automatically a citizen at his birth. He had to become a citizen when he turned 16 years old under the Indian Citizenship Act. So that bothers me because here he was clear. That seems like the intent of it would have allowed him to have citizenship based on the original amendment, and they excluded him. So I know there have been exclusions in the past. If Xi Jinping sent his grandson over here and he illegally crossed the Mexican border and his wife bore a child, would his great-grandson be an American citizen? See, I don't think this is a good law at all. I'm hoping that we could get a test case before the Supreme Court or get an amendment or something, because I really agree with you. I don't think that's the intention whatsoever of the 14th Amendment.
Yeah, Kevin, it's a national security issue. I mean, this is not just about domestic politics. This is about allowing people who mean us harm to take advantage of the American system and China's doing it, by the way, by sending women to have babies who are automatically American citizens. Those babies later will have the ability to sponsor other people coming into the country. I mean, it's something that's got to be addressed because it goes to the heart of America's ability to defend our sovereignty and our security.
Well, there's no question. I mean, we have these Chinese Communist Party police stations, and so there are citizens here that are also under the jurisdiction of China. I don't see how this could in any way be constitutional, and yet that's the way it's been interpreted, and it's created an enormous immigration problem. All right, EW, if you can hang with us, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about anchor babies. What does that mean, and how is that being exploited by foreign powers and individuals, literally to steal citizenship from the rest of us and hurting the rest of us? We'll be right back after this break. In uncertain times, finding stability in the economy can feel challenging. Well, what if you could navigate economic volatility while honoring your biblical values? At Timothy Plan, they believe this balance is possible. Timothy Plan filters its volatility-weighted ETFs and family of mutual funds through a biblical pro-life and pro-family lens, so you can see competitive returns and moral responsibility, helping you to weather the economic storms. With Timothy Plan, align your investments with your values while adapting to our ever-changing culture. Since 1994, Timothy Plan has been recognized leader in biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, your bridge between faith, finances, and the future. Visit timothyplan.com or call 1-800-TIM-PLAN or 1-800-846-7526. Investing includes risk, including possible loss of principal. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Here's a $10 bill. It's got the picture of Alexander Hamilton on the front of it. You know, it's kind of sad. When I was 10 years old, everything that I could buy for $1 now costs about $10. That's the cost of inflation. It's just paper. It's not backed by anything. You can't exchange it for gold and silver. You used to, but you can't do that anymore. And that's unfortunate. You know, pirates wouldn't accept this. Pirates, they wanted gold and silver. Patriots, the founders of this nation, also wanted gold and silver coin. In fact, they put a provision in the Constitution, 17 words, that said states could only make gold and silver coins tender within the states. That's why I wrote this new book, Pirate Money, Discovering the Founders' Hidden Plan for Economic Justice and Defeating the Great Reset. It will explain exactly the history of money and exactly why gold and silver coins can be made modern with new technology and a useful monetary system. PirateMoneyBook.com. We're talking with E.W. Jackson about a different kind of economic warfare. It's the kind where you can send a population across borders and make them citizens under U.S. law, which is a little scary thought. E.W., we ended with the notion of anchor babies. What's an anchor baby?
Well, there are many people who consider that to be an offensive term. Those on the left who like the idea of foreigners being able to come to the country, even as illegal aliens, have babies here and have those babies automatically become citizens, because it furthers their agenda of diminishing our sovereignty and the security of our borders. But an anchor baby basically is a baby that is born to parents who are not American citizens, but then that baby becomes an anchor to the country because that baby then has rights and abilities within the country that the parents don't have, and later on could sponsor those parents to come, not to mention giving those parents certain privileges, being in our country, having a child that is an American citizen.
Now, I see a difference between those who come here legally under our laws and we allow them, and then they have children here while green cards or residence or whatever. I can see a difference between that and somebody who enters the country illegal. How can you be subject to the jurisdiction thereof if you broke our laws to get here?
And Kevin, most of these anchor babies are the children of illegal aliens. I mean, it's only a small percentage that are actually the children of people who've come to the country legally. Of course, some overstay their welcome and end up having babies here. But most of them, overwhelming, 400,000 anchor babies in 2024. 75 to 80% of those babies were born to illegal aliens. So that's really what the issue is. And of course, we know many of those illegal aliens are on the terror watch list. Many of them are human traffickers, they're drug dealers, they're cartel members. I mean, we got some really bad actors taking advantage of America's constitutional system, and we've got to put a stop to it.
And even if they're, decent citizens, and not citizens, they're never citizens, but even if they're decent people and they want to get a job here, doesn't that hurt Americans who are also looking for jobs?
One of the things that I find most offensive that's become acceptable in nomenclature today is called the dreamer. And I've often said, but aren't the children of Americans dreamers? Don't we dream about doing the best we can with the wonderful freedom and prosperity that's offered in our country? How is it that being brought here by an illegal alien suddenly makes you a person of special status? I think we need to get back to making sure that the American dream is secure for the American people.
Well, it gives you special status even in colleges you get in-state tuition in some cases yep. Free tuition, which it seems ridiculous to me, where we have a lot of American citizens who really do have dreams and are still struggling in a very difficult economy from inflation and everything else. We just celebrated Martin Luther King Day here in America, and he had a dream, and his dream would be for the American citizens, regardless of color, to have equal opportunity. Can you speak to that?
Well, it's one of the reasons why I'm really personally insulted by the program and the whole problem, because the 14th Amendment was really passed to address, as you suggested earlier, talking about your Native American ancestry, to address my ancestors and their right to citizenship in this country. And for it to then be exploited by people who are really enemies of America, or in some cases, just coming and competing with the American people for resources that we need for ourselves and for our children, I just find it personally offensive, frankly. But just leaving aside my own personal antipathy for this, Kevin, this is a policy matter. It's bad for the country and bad for the American people.
Do other countries do this? I mean, can I just have a child in France and they become French, or in Australia or any other nation?
Well, you mentioned those two nations particularly, right? You can go visit one of those countries, live in one of those countries, but if you're not a citizen or that child doesn't have a parent who is, that child born in those countries is not a citizen, right? Most countries don't allow this. I think Canada does, but America is really an anomaly in this regard. And again, it's something that at some point has got to be corrected, either with a constitutional amendment or with a a decision by the Supreme Court that overturns their original interpretation of the 14th Amendment.
Now, why do you think in Wong Kim Ark they chose to interpret it the way they did? My feeling is there were a lot of Chinese people that were a part of the country, a part of the fabric of the country. They were invited in, they helped work, and they were here not illegally but legally, and therefore they had children. I see that as an intense distinction between that and someone who just crosses the border without being invited, being a part of the fabric of society and so forth.
And and Kevin, look, as a lawyer, to give those justices the benefit of the doubt, there is something to be said for no matter what you might think should have been intended or said, here's what was said.
Yeah.
So you interpret the law based on what it actually says. I still think it was a bad decision, but I can understand the rationale of saying, let's take the text based upon what it actually says. That's why I think a constitutional amendment is the ultimate answer, because that would clarify exactly what that 14th Amendment means.
And how would we do that? Would we do it just on a going forward basis? Because there are a lot of people who've become citizens. You can't take citizenship away from people that were granted it, can you? How does that work?
Well, no, but I think as a legal matter, you could provide, and I advocate for this, a kind of probationary status for people, because I just think people like Ilhan Omar, for example, I think her citizenship should have been revoked. And I think there are people who come to this country, get citizenship, and then show themselves to be enemies of America. And so there ought to be a time of proving that you actually have the best interests of the country at heart, that you're not violating our laws, that you're not trampling our Constitution. So I think that there's room for reconsidering some of these grants of citizenship.
Okay, so you've got an opportunity here. Let's say you're speaking directly to President Trump and his advisors, and I know you've got a lot of friends in this administration. What's the message that you give them regarding the 14th Amendment and his plans? I heard it earlier, you were talking, maybe a constitutional amendment. How does he make his case to the American people?
I think he's got to make the case on the basis of national security. The left is going to say it's prejudice, it's racism, it's this, it's that. They're going to do that. But I think he's got to make the argument on the basis of national security. And I have a simple constitutional amendment which says any biological child of an American citizen born anywhere in the world is an American citizen, but no person born in any state territory of the United States who does not have at least one biological parent who is an American citizen is an American citizen. And so it's very simple. If you don't have at least one biological parent, that's your anchor. Without that, I don't care where you're born in our territory, you're not a citizen.
All right, we need to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to be talking with Louie Gohmert. But thank you so much, EW. Where can people follow you?
They can go to standamerica.us.
Oh, hi, I'm Kevin Sorbo, and I'm here to tell you about coffee. Well, not really, but I'm going to use coffee to illustrate my point. Here we have several different coffees, each with its own unique characteristics. First, we have instant coffee. This coffee pretends to be coffee, but it's not really coffee at all. It's a fraud. Plus, it tastes terrible. I'm out. Next, we have woke coffee. Their coffee actually tastes pretty good, until you find out that when you drink it, you have to admit that you've oppressed other coffees in the past. Insanity. I'm out. Next, we have Big Tech Coffee. Now, these guys used to encourage folks to share with others what they thought about their coffee. But now, if you say you don't like Big Tech Coffee, they'll take away your coffee pot. I'm out. This brings us to Patriot Mobile Coffee, right? This is one big cup of truth and freedom. There's no fraud here. Patriot Mobile is America's real Christian conservative wireless provider. Patriot Mobile gives back millions of dollars every year to organizations that are on the front lines fighting for our freedoms. Patriot Mobile offers the best nationwide 4G and 5G coverage on the same networks as the other major carriers. So you'll get the same great coverage, along with 100% US-based customer support, while knowing you are supporting a company that shares your conservative values. Switch to Patriot Mobile today by visiting patriotmobile.com or call 972-PATRIOT.
All right, we were talking with E.W. Jackson about the 14th Amendment, and I brought on an expert here. He's a dear friend, great congressman, former judge, Louie Gohmert, who has stood in the halls of Congress, in the House, and talked about the 14th Amendment. Now it's back in the headlines because of President Trump's commentary. Congressman, what are your thoughts about the 14th Amendment and how it's being applied today?
Well, all you have to do, Kevin, is look at the way it's affected America. I don't know. Most people didn't notice. I've been talking about this for over 15 years. But here's an article from 2010, breaking news, that a New York hotel is staking its claim to have invented a new hospitality niche, birth tourism, an exclusive package for mothers who wish to give birth in the U.S., and they'll have the bonus of the newborn child gaining U.S. citizenship. There's an article when President Trump was president about how a place in New York City on the Upper East Side was making millions of dollars by hosting people. It was a Turkish chain of hotels, but eventually they came in and shut it down. They were and arrested people. They were providing incentives. It's really birthright tourism. You pay so much and we will bring you to New York, put you in an upscale apartment, take care of you until your baby is born, come for the last trimester, and we'll even get you a great doctor. And they were charging, get this, Medicare. It cost Medicare millions of dollars to pay for women to have a child so that they could say it is a U.S. citizen and get a U.S. passport. And people are not stupid around the world as some here in the United States think. You had leaders around, especially in the Middle East, that would and China, who there was one in the West Coast that had their services interrupted. Birthright tourism, pay so much money, we bring you to the U.S., and your child leaves with a U.S. passport. And so, but you had the guy that took over in in Egypt. He sent his wife over here twice to have babies. This was a guy that was part of the Muslim Brotherhood that was ultimately run out of office. But if you go back to the 14th Amendment and the debate on the 14th Amendment, that's what you learn how people were thinking about it. This was from Senator Trumbull. He was trying to justify a vote for this provision in the 14th Amendment. He said during his debate, the provision is all persons born in the United States subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That means subject to the complete jurisdiction thereof. And what do we mean by complete jurisdiction thereof? He said, not owing allegiance to anybody else. That's what it means. And that has always been interpreted until, after a case 1898 got misinterpreted by the State Department, but it was well understood, the 14th Amendment's adoption, that only acts under the naturalization law of the United States removed the subject to the jurisdiction of other countries. That's the only way you could do that. And even today, I hear people that are supposed to be learned scholars on television saying, well, anybody, it doesn't matter, anybody, it's the law of the land. Anybody born in this country is automatically an American citizen. Well, they're just ignorant. I don't think they're stupid, they're ignorant.
Well, my grandfather was born in 1908, and he wasn't a citizen until 1924 when they had the Indian Citizenship Act. So clearly it doesn't apply to everybody.
Well, right. And it doesn't, if you happen to be and this was pointed out, if you were a diplomat today, if you're a diplomat in the United States and you have a child, that child is not a U.S. citizen because you're not subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And I tried to get a Congressional Record Service report on what the law was, what the decision was, the executive order by the president. What was it that triggered us going from, like, was it your grandfather, great-grandfather?
My grandfather.
Your grandfather, 1908, you were not a citizen, so when was it? Well, there was a decision in 1898 by the U.S. Supreme Court, and that was United States versus Wong Kim Ark. And the Supreme Court made a mistaken decision, like they did in Dred Scott. They make mistakes. Sometimes they're egregious, like Dred Scott. But they made the decision on Wong Kim Ark that if you're a legal resident here in the United States and you have a child, then that child can be a citizen. So where was it when we started saying, if you're born here to an illegal alien, you're automatically a citizen? There's no executive order. There's no law that was passed. There's no Supreme Court case that says somebody here illegally has a child, that child's a citizen. But Kevin, somewhere along the way, somebody in the State Department decided they didn't have time to go chasing down in every birth whether the mother was here legally or illegally. So they just decided, you know what, it'll just be easier to just give a birth certificate to everybody that's born here, no matter whether here illegally or not. So I thank God that President Trump is going to challenge that, and with, I think, an executive order, but hopefully Congress will pass something as well to make clear. And I love the response from Justice Robert Jackson's famous reply when people were saying, no, you have to do this. He said, "This the Constitution is not a suicide pact." And that's the truth. It is not. We don't have to commit suicide by bringing people that hate this country, that want to destroy it, and say, your child is now a U.S. citizen, like Anwar al-Awlaki, the U.S. citizen that that Obama had bombed and killed, murdered him and his son without a trial.
Well, thank you so much, Congressman. We're going to have to wrap up. We'll summarize all this in our free economic battle plan at economicwarroom.com. Remember, what we see as a marketplace, our enemies view as a battle space. This is Kevin Freeman from the Economic War Room.